So just to get started, welcome everybody. Appreciate you taking the time on a Thursday afternoon. We know you're all very busy. My name is Chris Hughes. I'm the communications director for the city of Scranton. This is concerning the city's ARPA arts grants that were announced last week on Leap Day, February 29th. We're going to go through how this program came to be, and we're going to do a walkthrough of the application. So with that, I'm going to turn things over very quickly to our friend and collaborator, Desi Navarro from Answer Advisory. So let me try and make you the host here, Des.
While that's happening, good afternoon, everybody. As Chris mentioned, my name is Desi Navarro. I'm with Answer Advisory. We are the city's American Rescue Plan Act consultant. All right, so this is a webinar dedicated to explaining the City of Scranton's Notice of Funding Availability for the local arts organization. And these are going to be local arts organizations that meet specific NAICS codes, or the North American Industry Classification Coding System. Basically, it's a summary of how your business classifies itself based off of what type of service or what kind of goods you may provide. I'll walk you through those four NAICS codes as we get a little bit further into the webinar here. But these are meant to be recovery grants or economic recovery grants for those businesses, industries, local arts communities that meet those NAICS codes definitions. So the purpose is really three parts. The first, provide an overview of the city's local art organization recovery grant program. Two, we want to make sure that we clearly define the eligible beneficiaries, which are the local art organizations in this case, and eligible uses of funding if awarded. And then finally, three will be that third part of demonstrating how to actually go about applying for this grant. So high level, American Rescue Plan Act. So back in March of 2021, there was a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill that was approved by the Biden administration, which originally started with 7 eligible use categories or 7 ways that you could spend funds on eligible uses. That has now increased to 10. But today, what we're going to focus on is the category that's called addressing negative economic impacts, specifically for impacted industries. So this category was initially built to really serve small businesses and nonprofits, specifically 501c3s and C19s. You may know, and you may have actually seen some previous programs that the city has run specific to those eligible applicants and beneficiaries, those small businesses and nonprofits. But they were also able to analyze specifically the local arts organizations within the city, collect some data, and see if they would qualify as another impacted industry, meeting Treasury's definition of impacted industry. In gathering that data and doing the analysis, we were able to find, yes, there are 4 different NAICS code classifications for local arts folks within the city of Scranton that would meet that criteria. And so that's what this program is designed to serve. So here's a quick overview of the different funding opportunities that exist that are externally facing grant programs. So the city had identified needs through an early on community survey that was done, a couple of years ago now at this point. Found that public health and education, housing, economic recovery, and recently some disaster relief needs were really the most prevalent within the city. You'll see that these local art organization grants are going to fall under the economic recovery bucket, where, as I mentioned before, they had designed some grant programs for some small businesses, some nonprofits, some small business expansions, things like that. This now is an opportunity for the local arts community to participate in that category. So definitions to be aware of that are key here for you all today. In all of the guidance and all of the terminology that you'll see posted, the City of Scranton will always be referred to as the recipient. They are the ones that have received now the $68 million of the American Rescue Plan Act, state local fiscal recovery funds. And they really have 2 mechanisms to get that funding down to community. One is through direct awards to beneficiaries like the local arts organizations within the city that qualify. And they can directly award those through grant agreements, assuming that the beneficiaries, in this case, those local arts organizations, are determined to be eligible. Or they have the ability to partner with a subrecipient, like you saw on the previous slide, a Scranton Tomorrow, a NeighborWorks, an SACF, to administer a program on their behalf. The key difference is, as a beneficiary, or as you all in this case, you're typically an individual or an organization that's going to be receiving the funds as the end user or the entity directly benefiting from the financial assistance. The key being you will not be responsible for determining any kind of eligibility or compliance. That will be done for you to ensure that you are an eligible beneficiary to receive that grant fund. Whereas conversely, the subrecipients that the city is partnered with, they do have ongoing responsibilities for determining eligibility, monitoring, reporting, programmatic decision making, and they're really carrying out an eligible use on behalf of the city. So there's a lot of federal compliance that comes along with that kind of responsibility. But for you all, the mechanism is going to be a direct award from the city of Scranton to the local arts folks as eligible beneficiaries. So to be an eligible beneficiary for this program, what does that mean? Well, you must be a local arts organization that operates within the city of Scranton under one of the following NAICS codes. The first being 711510, or independent artists, writers, and performers. Could also be under 711110, which are theater companies and dinner theaters, or 711130, musical groups and artists, or the last one would be 71120, which are dance companies. These NAICS codes are how your business typically qualifies or identifies itself in terms of the services or the goods that you provide within the city. So if you're meeting one of these categories, we should be able to verify that through maybe your website or through a statement that you'll have as part of your application of, yes, I am an independent writer within the city of Scranton. This is my business. This is what I do, and describing that so we can verify that you meet that designation for that NAICS code. It is only available for these 4 categories. If you do not fall within one of these 4 categories, you would not be eligible for funding through this grant program. The other key eligibility requirement is, as an other impacted entity, and as Treasury defines that in their rule book for these funds, you must have been operational prior to the start of the pandemic. So prior to March 2020, you must be able to provide evidence that you were in operation at that time. If you're a local arts organization, say a dance company that came into business in March of 2021, unfortunately, you would not be eligible for this grant program. There's really no way around that rule. It's stated by Treasury, and we've got to maintain that. The third is you must be able to provide evidence of the number of employees that you had working for you prior to the start of the pandemic. That can be number of full-time employees. It can be number of part-time employees. We just need to be able to verify that prior to March of 2020. So that can be through payroll, maybe an employee roster that's signed by your CEO, your director, whoever heads up your organization. But we do need evidence of how many folks you had working for you before the pandemic. You must also be in good standing and registered with the city single tax office, as well as current on your local taxes and trash fees. And then during the period beginning March 1st of 2020 and ending at the time of your application, you must not have received any other alternate federal, state, or local grant funding to cover your same need or cost impact that you're submitting here. So the need and the cost impact that you all will be submitting for here is from an economic impact due to COVID. So if you've gotten a COVID-related grant to kind of help you recover from that, and it's fully met the cost that you've lost or your negative economic impact, you're not going to be eligible for any additional funding. If you've gotten some funding, but it fully hasn't met your need or your impact, you're still eligible then to receive funding for the unmet need that you may still have that exists. I'm going to walk you through a duplication of benefit worksheet that's really going to simplify that down for you guys. It's going to be based off of a calculation that our grant team is going to do to confirm your need. And then all that you're going to be required to do is disclose any of those COVID-related funds, again, that you've gotten from the feds, from the state, or from local sources. And then it's just going to be a quick addition, subtraction, and determine, is there an unmet need left there? So some examples of eligible uses if you are awarded. So some key things here. If you are awarded a grant fund here, you can use your award to retain employees or hire back, new employees to get back to those pre-pandemic levels. You can also use it to mitigate financial hardships, including but not limited to any kind of decreased revenue, financial insecurity, increased costs caused by the pandemic, or challenges covering any typical operational costs like mortgage payments, rent, utilities, or other operational costs. You could also use it to cover any COVID-19 mitigation efforts. So if you're still paying for cleaning or disinfecting or any of those other safety investments or upgrades, you could definitely use it for that. Or, for technical assistance, counseling, or other services to support business planning. The key here is there's a lot of things that you can use it for once you've been determined that you're eligible and can receive the funds. Well, what the city wants to do is they want to make sure, and you'll be required to tell them how you plan on using the funds, is we want to make sure that these funds are actually being used in a way that's truly benefiting you all from what you experienced due to the pandemic, and it's helping you get back on your feet from those causes. So looking for these key things, there's some flexibility here too. Like if you've got other operational costs that are really pressing for you, at the end of the day, it's going to be your funds. What we want to see is that they're not being misused in any way once they've been awarded to you all. So that's the quick and dirty summary. I'm going to kick it over, Chris, to you if you want to walk us through the how to apply.
So real quick, I just want to show everybody this screen real quick. This should be Neighborly. So this is what you
Neighborly.
Very good. Thanks, Erica. So this should be what you folks see when you actually sign into Neighborly. It does land you on a sign-in page. You're going to want to click on this register tab and register your email address. It will send you a verification code, and you'll need to use that when you actually sign into the service. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share really quickly. I'm going to switch screens real quick because I actually have a draft window up. And I want to show you folks what the actual interface looks like. And we're going to go relatively quickly, just with respect to everybody's time, so we have time for questions. So this is what Neighborly will look like when you get onto the inside. Hopefully you're seeing the Scranton Electric City symbol. I see Erica nodding. That's always a good sign. When you folks start your applications, you're going to use this ARPA program application down the bottom, and you're going to hit Start Application. I have a blank that, as you can see, it's just a test one for us. We're going to use that today to walk through this. So really quickly, when you get in, for some reason, it makes you click here to continue to get started, and it kicks you into the program overview window. Now, many of you on this call may have already gotten an email from me last night if you have started or even submitted your application. Because of the demand for this program, some of you folks actually got in here before we needed to make a really necessary adjustment to the form. So as Desi had mentioned, everybody on this call is going to be a beneficiary of this program. So you would select the direct beneficiary grant in the first field. And then in the second field that appears once the conditional logic is triggered, there is a selection here for local arts community grant. And that's the one that you folks are all going to be involved in. Desi, correct me if I'm wrong, but the qualified census tract issue does not apply to applicants for this program, correct?
That's correct. It's going to be based off of NAICS code only. Yep.
Very good. So you folks are welcome to figure out if your organization is based within the qualified census tract, but that's not going to have an impact on your application. Again, really quickly, if you do make any changes to any forms, it's going to ask you whether or not you want to save those changes. So I'm going to proceed without saving, but that's okay because this is our draft. A lot of these forms are going to be very simple for you folks to fill out. So contact information is very basic: legal name of your organization, executive directors, federal tax IDs, physical address for the organization, mailing address, organization telephone numbers, email address, all the things that we'll need to get back in touch with you if we have questions or need additional documents, especially to complete your grant application. The second piece is your organizational information. So when were you founded? There is an odd little caveat here. We had some organizations that were part of our wellness programming in 2022 that they were founded before the year 1900, and the form wasn't accepting it as being, in the 1800s. So as technology rolls on, we adapt with it. If you are tax exempt, as we mentioned, if you are a nonprofit, we'd like you to illustrate that here. The areas that you typically serve, any organization mission and statement, whether or not you are registered and in good standing with the city and with current tax and trash fees, as Desi had mentioned. Just for our records, are any of the organization's staff or board members, immediate family members of the city staff or an elected official, employees within your organization, the services you provide, the target populations that you serve, and an estimate on either the number of households or persons that your organization does serve. Section C is really your grant narrative and your grant request. So the top field up here is going to be how much you're seeking for this program. So just as a reminder for anybody who may have missed the initial news announcement, the maximum award for this program will be $45,000. So that means in Section C2, nobody in this program will require a SAM.gov ID number in order to apply for this program because our maximum award for the program is under the $50,000 threshold. So that's important to note there. C3 for you folks, I would all suggest, beneficiary award is going to be the section, but you're going to skip that here. I imagine many of you are not indulging in capital expenses or buildings or renovations or anything like that. So my suggestion is to select the other box and to fill in that you're filling out for the local arts grant. And C4 is your narrative. For those of you who are familiar with the grant process, this is where you're able to tell the city what you hope to achieve by obtaining this funding. Are you trying to recover financially from organizational losses or independent artist losses caused by the pandemic? Are you trying to create a new program? Are you investing in new equipment that had to be replaced? Whatever the case might be, that's where you're going to tell us basically the essence of your individual grant application. Section D is going to be really important. I want to make sure that everybody knows that, again, this program for you folks as artists and art organizations are beneficiary grants. So you will click yes in Section D that you are applying for a direct beneficiary grant. And the logic produces this whole new set of questions. So one of the most important pieces here, the applicant agrees that it will have all funds contracted or obligated by September 30th, 2024 and expended by September 30th, 2026. Those are our deadlines related to the Treasury's rules for the ARPA program, so it's really important to note those out there. And again, with respect to time, I don't want to necessarily enumerate all of these, but if you folks have questions, you're welcome to follow up. I did drop email addresses for the essential city personnel that can help you address those questions as you go on with your application. But COVID-19 impacts, any capital expenses that you may be applying for, identify the COVID-19 impacted individual, class, or group, explain how the impacted group was directly impacted by the pandemic, the anticipated future social and economic or community impact based on what your organization provides, and how, if applicable, how does your project include voices from disproportionately impacted groups within the community? Section E is my favorite to discuss with beneficiary grant recipients because it's super easy. You folks are all going to choose no. You're not applying for a subrecipient grant. So Section E is simply a no, a save, and a move on. Section F is important because, as Desi mentioned, we have to make sure that we don't create what the Treasury refers to as a duplication of benefits. So this recognizes any additional funding that your organization may have received. Now, from what we've heard from the arts organizations that are members of the Arts Council or that are in direct contact, with the mayor's office, we know that a lot of you folks still have losses that you're looking to recover from the pandemic. Our obligation, based on the ARPA rules, is to make sure that we don't provide a benefit above what you've lost. So that's really important for us for auditing purposes for this program later on. So we ask that you enumerate any of those costs, whether PPP loans, CARES Act, economic injury disaster loan advances, things like that, that would potentially create a duplication of benefits. If you're not sure, list it, and our team, including the folks from Answer, will make sure whether or not a duplication of benefits actually does exist. Section G is related to your organization's finances. So your revenues for the past fiscal year, current fiscal year, projected expenses for current fiscal, and your dates covered by your current fiscal. A lot of folks aren't sure. Some folks operate on a January 1 start date for their fiscal year. They start their financial calendar at the beginning of the calendar year. Some folks do an October 1st start. I had worked in higher ed prior to this position, and they started on a July 1st. So there's a number of options there. You folks, I'm sure, will know what that means in terms of your organization. How did your organization typically raise funds pre-COVID-19? I think that's really important, especially for a lot of you folks who are familiar with the grant process. And then information on any insurances that you may carry for yourself or your organization. And then really quickly, because I don't want to run us over time, this is the required document section. So again, we've talked a little bit about duplication of benefits. I think the form, Desi, has been changed a little bit for this group. So I think there's a PDF that we'll need to issue to everybody on this call and make available on the city's website. We will send that information out, and Chanel Kierce, our outreach coordinator, will also be making contact with the members of the Arts Council as well. So want to make sure that information gets out into the community. A copy of a W-9 form is going to be essential. We need that in order to be able to pay you from the city. Um, Tax returns or 990 forms for the last several years. I just got my 10-minute warning, so I'm going to wrap this up really quickly so we can get to questions and Desi's final piece. If anybody has questions on the required document section, we're going to do our best to update the city's FAQ page regarding ARPA. And as soon as that's complete, we'll also issue that information out to you folks. So hopefully that was thorough, but gives us enough time to continue on. I'm going to pass my hosting duties back to Desi to wrap us up and to open us up for a couple questions.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chris. And also just to be aware, so that document list was pretty lengthy. In the guidance that's posted online specific to this program, it'll actually line item out which ones of those documents on that page you'll need to provide, because this is it's the similar format that's been used for the city's grant programs in the past. And there are going to be some documents that you're just not going to need to worry about for this program. So make sure you verify that, you check that. And as Chris mentioned, we can add a FAQ clarification to it as well. So the first is just a general review of what a NAICS code is and how to use it to confirm what your business, what code your business or organization falls within. So you can always visit the NAICS Codes Association online. There's a link here embedded in the PowerPoint here that you can access. And what you'll see is for this program, we were able to analyze theater dance companies, and dinner companies, dance companies, musical groups, and artists. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you'll find the independent artists, writers, and performers. What you want to do is go ahead and just click which one you feel like your business falls within, and they'll give you a little description of what that industry code is really meant for. And as long as your organization produces revenue at 51% or more, under one of these NAICS codes, assuming that, some organizations may fall within multiple, whichever is your primary NAICS code or that 51% or more of your revenue, that's the one that you're going to want to claim on your application and identify yourself as. Another kind of re-review here of what Chris went through in Neighborly, a key part of your application is going to be your duplication of benefit form. It's going to be really easy for you. All that you're going to need to do is from the time that the pandemic hit until the time of your application, if you've received other assistance through federal, state, or local funding sources, things like CARES Act grants or PPP loans, county COVID loans, or county COVID grants or anything like that, you're going to need to disclose that on this form. You're going to tell us the name of the funding source, the date that you received it, and the amount that you had received. And then you're going to just subtotal that up for us at the bottom. Our grant reviewers are going to be responsible for calculating your total need. There's a calculation that we've done based off of employment levels or loss of employment levels based off of the data that was collected to define you all as an impacted entity. So it's going to be a standard calculation that we're going to do for everybody, and that's going to determine what the need is. And then it's going to be a quick add subtract to just confirm that you haven't received alternate funding from federal, state, or local sources that fully meets that need. If you have received some, that's okay, as long as you haven't received equal to or more than your impact calculation. If you're in that bucket, you're going to be deemed ineligible to receive any other additional funding from the city, because that would create a duplication of benefit. If you haven't received any funds from other sources, or you've received some but not enough to kind of completely close the gap of your need, then you would still be eligible for that remaining unmet need amount. At the bottom of this form, you're also just going to reiterate what your NAICS code is, and you're going to identify the number of full-time employees your organization had working for you in Q4 of 2019. If you had part-time employees, you're going to do it as full-time equivalents. So a quick example, if you had 2 part-time employees, both working 20 hours per week, that would equate to 1 full-time equivalent. So we're looking for those 40-hour per week full-time equivalents. There is what you're going to identify. Then you're going to sign and you're going to date the form. You're going to upload that into the Neighborly when you're complete. Once all of the applications have been submitted, all of the documentation is complete, the city will then review applications with a panel and consider the following factors in determining prioritization and who's going to ultimately end up getting funded. So it's first going to be based off of, is the organization an eligible entity? Second, they're going to look at the quality of your application and the documentation and evidence that you submitted as part of your application. So make sure that if you're uploading documents, they're clear, they're legible. When you're putting in information about how you were impacted by the pandemic, we're not looking for essays by any means, but we are looking for a clear and to the point impact, and be as succinct as possible of how your organization has been impacted by the pandemic. It's also going to be based off of location within the city. So as part of the city's mission statement, they are looking to use ARPA funding to the extent possible for those areas that have been traditionally underserved. So within the city, those would be those qualified census tract areas or those low income areas within the city. So if your organization resides within one of those areas, the likelihood of being prioritized will go up for you. Making sure that, again, your narrative is clear in terms of the COVID-19 impact your organization has sustained from both an operations and a finance standpoint. And then also that alternate funding analysis, the previous slide where we were walking through your duplication of benefit form, just making sure that you are still eligible for funding. And then if there are other factors, as deemed appropriate by the panel members, those may be considered as well. Applications are due on April 12th, so that is a hard deadline. And then they will go under review for both eligibility and scoring between April 12th through about mid-May. And the city is looking to then be in a position to announce awards on May 31st or the end of May. So with that said, we hope that you found this webinar helpful. Hopefully, as you get into the application, that's the other thing we'd recommend is get into it early. Because as you get into it, you'll see, there's questions there that you may not be expecting, or maybe there's documents there that you need to go track down and make sure it gets uploaded. So start early, get questions submitted if you have them. That way you can get assisted early, and then you're not waiting until the deadline when if we're getting a bunch of applications submitted last minute, the likelihood of one of our grant reviewers being able to respond quickly to one of your questions is probably going to go down a little. So earlier is better. Jump in there today if possible and at least get it started. That would be something we'd recommend. So again, thank you for your time.